Relationship Reality. And tonight we're actually going to end our series talking about our first subject that we've been talking about over the past several weeks, and that was where relationships came from. And we talked about how relationships started with God and how we are able to have relationship because he first had relationship with us. And so tonight we're going to pick up where we left off last week. And last week we finally got to the part where God brought the woman. And so in chapter 2, verse 21, it says this. It says, "So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man." Now, what we actually see here is we see the first surgery that had ever taken place. The first surgery that was performed was actually performed by God. And it's amazing because we look how doctors perform things today and how the surgeries are performed today, and it's an amazing thing. But when you think about God, God actually performs a surgery. And I want you to think about this. How y'all doing, Adrian and John and Rob? Good to see you. Just giving you a shout. But think about this. Adam couldn't be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually compatible without one of his own kind. So remember how we talked about God made man first, and we talked about the things that have to do with what makes a man spiritual, and he has to be spiritual when it comes to relationship with God. That's how God created him. But now we see that he's bringing another human being into fruition so that Adam can now have a emotional, a mental, and a spiritual relationship with this person who had to be of the same kind. Now, what I mean by that is it had to be another human being, because Adam could not have this type of relationship with the animals. So I want you to think about something else here. So we see here that this woman who now is being created was actually derived out of the side of man. This lets us know something. Now, what does it let us know? It lets us know that she is not independent of man. Well, where did I get that from? Well, when we read earlier in the chapter, we could see that God created man from the dust of the earth. And then we also can see that God created the animals from the dust of the earth. So now, if he creates man and the animals from the dust of the earth, they actually are derived out of the same substance. But now, what do you see God doing? He does it differently with the woman. He takes a rib out of the man and he forms the woman out of the rib that is derived out of the man. Now, what is God trying to imply there? Or what's going on there? Well, what we see here is that there is now a relationship between the man and the woman by virtue of God taking a rib from the man. They are to be equal. They come from the side. She comes from the side. When you look at the man and the woman, they are to work together as a team, even though he was first. And so what else do we get from that? We get that they should not be operating independently of each other. This is by original design. I'm not making this up. You can see it right there in the text in chapter 2. So God, he creates this woman from the side of the man. It represents equality. It represents the same substance. And it represent and should represent that there should be no competition. But we know we have a problem with that today, and there's a reason why we do, and that comes later. But anyway, we see here that there's purpose now. And the purpose is that when God creates the woman now is able to combat the loneliness that the man has. There's able to be a development of intimacy. There's also the development of fellowship between a man and a woman. We also see from the text, and the text says down a little bit farther down, that there's procreation, and we also see that it's for pleasure. So now when we look at God doing this, what we're seeing here is that in his original intent, God created the man and the woman to experience a compatibility, not based upon one of these tests that you see today, but based upon them being in a spiritual capacity. We also see that there's intimacy involved. We also see that there should be a fellowship that's involved between the man and the woman. And also there's procreation, which God said to be fruitful and multiply. And we also see pleasure. Now, I had made a comment earlier before I move on to the next thing. I had said that God made the woman not to be independent of the man. Well, let's think about that for a second. Is God actually saying that one of the purposes in terms of his design is for marriage? That's a good question, isn't it? Well, it's true. When we look at God's original design, it was for marriage. God has designed us to be in a relationship together as a man and a woman. That is actually marriage. And we see here with the intent that God had, that they both were created in his image. And so when we look at the man and we look at the woman, we see that they both represent the image of God. And as they come together, God is going to let us know in a verse that I'm going to use in a second, that behind that is something else that he has. And what that is a reflection of who he is by virtue of them being together. So let me move along because I don't want to waste much time here. So we're able to see then that Adam, he makes a comment in verse 23. After God brings the woman to him, notice what he says. He says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman." So now he names her woman. Adam had named all the animals, and now he names this other human that God now brings to him because God says that he should not be alone. And then he names her woman, knowing that she had come from his side. And he even says it, "and shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." And so what are we seeing from this? Now, I'm going to bring something up here that a lot of people have probably never heard of. What we actually see, in order for Adam to be drawn toward this woman, he creates her differently than he does, than he's been created. He creates her with a different body type. He creates her with different type of hair. He creates her with the ability to talk with a different vocal tone. He creates her to have a softer skin tone. And he creates her to be different. She thinks differently. Now notice, Adam was immediately attracted to her, which lets us know that Adam has in him the ability to be attracted to this woman. Now, she also has the ability to be able to be attracted to him, but it's stronger in the man. Now, this is a very important point because a lot of people don't understand how this works. And it's going to probably take me a whole lot more time, but I'm not going to get into it a lot tonight. But the fact is, we have been given by design an attraction gift. And that gift is to pull us toward the opposite sex. And so when we look at this attraction gift, it's for the purpose of us being drawn to the woman. Now, how do we know that? Because when we look at how we are, when we first meet a woman, for most guys, it's not because they're so intelligent. No, let's be honest. It's because of how they look. It's because there's certain kinds of let me say it like this. There are certain body parts that men like. Some men like feet. Some men like the upper part. Some men like the lower part. Now, I'm being very, I'm being specific without being vulgar. Okay? But the fact is, it's true. We are attracted to the woman initially because of how they look. There's nothing wrong with that. It's by design. Here's where the problem comes in. The problem comes in because after the fall, we are messed up, and that's going to be our next series we're going to talk about, because there's an issue with lust. And when lust is there, in addition to the attraction, it causes us to do other things besides just appreciate how a woman looks. We're going to get into that later. But I just wanted to point out that we have been given an attraction gift, and that is what's initially used when we actually meet someone, especially when men meet a woman. And that's what's taking place. So let me move on. I'm going to get to one more thing for tonight, and then I'm going to close up. But notice something else. For this reason, in verse 24, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. Now, isn't that something when you think about that? Here we have God saying that a man and a woman are to leave their family, and there's no family yet except for Adam and Eve. So God is speaking future tense. For those who will come out of Adam and Eve, I'm letting you know now from the very beginning that in order for a family to start, and what my purpose is, a man needs to leave his home, and when he leaves his home, he needs to leave in every aspect. And I want to explain that later, but he needs to leave physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and financially. He needs to leave that home. And then he needs to unite with that woman who leaves her home the same way. And when they come together, they form a new family and a new relationship. And this is the design that God has created for the man and the woman. It's right here. So, one more thing. They are to become one flesh. What's up, cuz? They are to become one flesh. They are to be united together as one. And that's difficult for a lot of couples. And I need to talk about that. I might get into that a little bit more, hopefully, next week if I can. I see if I can do that. But they are to become one. And becoming one, notice what God did? He showed us that the man and the woman, when they become one physically, they are also becoming one emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and psychologically. That's what this sexual relationship does. It's more than just physical. There's a spiritual component of oneness there. And I think we need to talk about that a little bit. But anyway, I need to stop for tonight. And I hope I've given you something to talk about. And I think I might extend this series that we're talking about now, which is where do relationships come from. I need to talk about a couple more points and expand on this point of oneness next week. So I'm going to do that. And just want to thank everybody out there who joined me tonight. And hi, Dan and Andre. Good to see you. Hope everybody else is doing good. And the last thing I'm going to say is you can catch us on our website if you like. And as you already know, there's a book out there if you want to buy the book. And there's a lot of other information in there that I talk about that's good for relationships. People who are moving toward marriage. And so with that, I'm going to call it a night. Hope you enjoyed what you heard tonight. Thanks for joining me. Take care.